disagree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to death your right to say it. Though short, this quote by Voltaire sums up the intentions of free speech. However, these values are not as clear-cut when translated into government policies. The definitions and boundaries of free speech have been debated on for years without any complete consensus. What is the ideal definition of free speech, and where do its boundaries lie? This video seeks to find an answer to that question. Before we begin, the reason why this topic is so important is so that we can fully understand the implications of extreme freedom or extreme regulation of speech. Therefore, we are able to understand the circumstances that have caused and have arisen from related policies. This presentation will analyze free speech by looking at case studies of two countries on opposite ends of the spectrum, that is, the United States of America and Singapore. Firstly, the US is known for its emphasis on free speech. Its citizens are acutely aware of their constitutional right to freedom of speech, as mandated in the First Amendment. However, the United States policies has its flaws. Taking the example of the First Amendment, it does not cover words or actions meant to incite violence, or in other words, hate speech. With this in mind, it is important to note that there isn't a concrete legal definition on what constitutes free speech. Neither is there one for hate speech. Here's what can go wrong. Firstly, bigoted people can abuse this right to publicly make derogatory comments without repercussions. As an example, Milo Yiannopoulos, a conservative writer who hurled racist and sexist remarks at Leslie Jones, who acted in the Ghostbusters movie. After being permanently banned from Twitter, Yiannopoulos said, "Some people are going to find this perfectly acceptable. Anyone who believes in free speech certainly will not," suggesting that his ban from Twitter was curtailing his right to free speech, when it only protected a victim of racism and sexism. The impact of these freely made remarks is acutely felt by minority groups. These influential people who perpetrate bigotry are often defended by people with similar views, manipulating their right to free speech to propagate hate against marginalized communities. What's worse is that when politicians are able to do so, they may implement bigoted policies. On top of that, people use their right to free speech to demand that their bigoted opinions be accepted. Mike Pence, known for his hostility towards the LGBTQ+ community, was delivering a speech at the University of Notre Dame when a large number of graduates walked out on him. Pence then went on to criticize these students, saying that his freedom of speech was being suppressed by students refusing to listen to him based on his homophobic comments. From this example, what then can we say constitutes free speech? Firstly, free speech means that people are allowed to disagree with what you say. It definitely is not an excuse to make sexist, racist, or bigoted remarks. It does not demand that your opinions be accepted. Someone else can exercise their right to free speech by refusing to listen to your opinion. Often, people think being censored or criticized for their opinions are obstructing their right to free speech. However, studies have shown that these people only care about the ability to be bigoted without opposition. A 2017 study found that out of hundreds of participants, those with high levels of racial prejudice were much more concerned with the upholding of free speech, but were also less likely to defend free speech in non-racial scenarios. Let us now take a look at Singapore. When I was preparing this presentation, Singapore ranked at 151 for the World Press Freedom Index, and that ranking hadn't changed since 2013. However, now it has, and Singapore stands at 158 and internationally. This rank is lower than countries like South Sudan, Mexico, and Israel. This lack of freedom of speech has been recognized internationally. In a 2017 report, the Human Rights Watch described Singapore's laws as draconian, which meant that Singapore's laws regarding freedom of speech are extremely severe and go further than what is right or necessary. The example they cited in their report was that of Jolovan Wang, a man facing criminal charges for 3 peaceful events, that is, a candlelight vigil for a condemned man, a silent protest on an MRT carriage, and having a foreigner deliver a speech over video call to an audience without a permit. Police permits are required for any cause-related assembly outside the closely monitored speaker's corner. This means that every protest is subject to government approval. While this may be important to maintain social harmony, this ultimately suppresses free speech, as it gives the government the ability to deny a permit to any cause that could possibly challenge them and their beliefs. Up till here, why are these regulations so important for Singapore? One explanation is that because Singapore prides itself on racial and religious harmony, the government must take extra precaution to ensure that a mutual tolerance of races is not disturbed, as this could possibly lead to racial clashes or a repeat of Singapore's past. While those intentions are valid and important, there are deeper, more problematic policies implemented by the Singaporean government. The Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Acts, otherwise known as POFMA, which took effect in October 2019, was meant to curb the spread of fake news. However, it is also another avenue for the suppression of free speech. The law effectively hands the government the exclusive right to declare any news posted online as false and have it removed as long as it is in the public interest to do so. The bill also defines public interest broadly, explicitly stating that public interest constitutes preventing the diminution of public confidence in the government. Thus, the definition of public interest has been set up such that it is possible for the government to remove any online criticism of it. Additionally, the proposed law provides no guidance on how the ministers will determine whether a statement is true or false, or what standards are used to do so. This gives rise to the possibility of heavy suppression of speech. In the words of Phil Robertson, Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch Asia, Singapore's ministers should not have the power to single-handedly decree what is true and what is false. By looking at these two case studies, what then is free speech? In both instances, it is important to draw the boundaries between hate speech and free speech. Hate speech is meant to deliberately degrade a person or a group of people, while free speech is the freedom to state an opinion. In other words, your right to free speech does not precede someone else's right to safety, identity, and happiness. Free speech is also directly influenced by government intervention. The answer to how much a government can intervene may be vague, but it is extremely important that true freedom of speech should not be curtailed by a government seeking to silence its critics. It is important to note that a conclusion may never be drawn on where the boundaries of free speech lie. But it is essential that we are aware of our current situation and its effects on what we're allowed to say and who's allowing us to say it. With that, I thank you for watching this video. Feel free to leave your opinions on the subject down below, and I'll see you in the next video.